Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Let's continue with the culinary herbs that you can grow in your garden that have great medicinal properties. And as always, this is from my book, Growing Your Survival Herb Garden, for preppers, homesteaders, permaculture people, and everyone else. And today we're going to start with a really interesting herb. I was talking, I guess it was last week's show or show before last, about how our ancestors actually cooked with a lot more herbs and spices than we normally do now. Our concept of American cooking, well, it's one very highly influenced by English cooking, and the English are not exactly known um, for making fantastic food. Now, granted, it's not always fair. I love a good English roast beef. I love Yorkshire pudding. I love bubble and squeak. I love toad and the hole. I love all that stuff. It's good stuff. But in comparison to the French, Spanish, Italians, etc., the English didn't eat a lot of raw vegetables, a lot of salads, and didn't use a lot of herbs and spices. That said, even they used to use more than they do now. But really, our concept of American cooking comes from the Great Depression. It comes from rationing during World War II, etc. Before, certainly before the Civil War, our ports were bringing in spices from all over the world, and our ancestors were actually cooking with a lot of herbs and growing a lot of culinary and, of course, medicinal herbs that have fallen out of the American diet. That's a real shame. We need to bring these back in. And one of the most interesting is lovage. Now, you probably never tasted lovage. I was fortunate that when I was a kid, we had a little spice rack, and there was these little glass bottles of dried herbs, and one of them was lovage. So I actually know what this one tastes like, and it was one of my favorites. So it is one that I prioritize on my list of growing. Very interestingly, going back to the oldest cookbook in the Western world, it's written by a guy named Apicius in ancient Rome. This is, before the time of crisis. He was cooking for the Caesars and the royal court, and really interesting cookbook. Ancient Roman food is actually really impressive. Very different, very different than Italian food. Very different than Greek food, actually. But the Italian food we think of now really began in the Neapolitan era. And of course, it's full of tomatoes and peppers and eggplants and all this that were and potatoes and all that even, and the pastas and really that all came from trade. Tomatoes and potatoes and peppers and such come from South America. Before the Italians had ships that could go and conquer new lands or trade with natives somewhere, they were those vegetables didn't exist in their diets at all. But they actually had in ancient Rome a very interesting style of cooking. They were importing a lot of spices from Asia, and they made their own fish sauce called garum, which is like the kind of fish sauce you would use in Thai cooking, or well, various Asian cuisines, but or like Worcester sauce. Actually, Worcester sauce is an anchovy-based sauce in part. That's one of the ingredients, the many ingredients that go into it. But it was very fresh and very seasonal. Used a lot of herbs and a lot of spices, and it was really somewhere between like classical French and Chinese in flavor. I know that's strange to think about, but yeah, 2,000 years ago in Rome, plus 2,000 plus years, 2,500 years, I guess, they were making sauces that combined olive oil, fish sauce, wine, vinegar, honey, and a lot of black pepper. They used a lot of cloves and anise and cinnamon and all this. And they would be cooking, grilling meats or stewing meats in that sauce. And really, a lot of mushrooms, a lot of really interesting flavors. You can find a copy of Apicius on archive.org. You can buy a copy for, just a few bucks used off of whatever your favorite used bookseller is. Check it out. Really interesting, I guess, philosophy of cooking. Gives us a lot of new ways to think about using the foods that are coming out of our garden, or the fish and game, or livestock. And everything I've tried so far has been absolutely delicious. Our concept of ancient Roman food is really off. It's not what I was taught in school. It was actually a very high class, sophisticated, sauce based, and seasonal way of cooking. Well, the reason I bring this up is because, well, two reasons really. Obviously, 2,500 years ago and beyond that, uh, they didn't have electricity and they didn't have, an electric stove, a gas stove, an electric oven. They didn't have anything like that. So if we were to look at that style of cooking, specifically from a prepper standpoint, how how better to set up an outdoor kitchen, maybe put a little, maybe put it on your patio, put a gazebo, an arbor over it, something to give you some shade, keep the rain off of you. And it was just like an open grill, a bread oven, like you've seen the old-fashioned bread ovens or pizza ovens even. And you can build this stuff like really cheap, and all you need to burn in is wood. You can burn just wood down to coals, or you can make charcoal. And you get into this style of cooking, which they didn't have, of course, refrigeration, so everything had to be either heavily salted and herbed or fermented to be preserved. So really, if you wanted to go like, if you were concerned that you might have to go like off grid with your cooking and just eat what was coming out of your garden, or your livestock from your backyard and the woods and creeks and ponds around you, I honestly I cannot think of a better starting place than to get a copy of Apicius and learn the way things were done a couple thousand, 3,000 years ago, and you're going to be really impressed. Honestly, this is very impressive food. But the one of the herbs they used in almost every dish was lovage. So that's how I'm bringing this around full circle. Lovage is in the Apiaceae family, like so many of these herbs are. Dill, fennel, carrot, etc., etc. Apiaceae family. This one's unique though, because other than in Roman cooking, it's generally considered a salad or pot herb. So going to old cookbooks in England and France and such, and in Italy and Spain and Germany, a very popular herb in ancient German cooking, they would take this plant, and they would either put it in a raw salad, or they would cook it as a green, as a vegetable to eat. But the Romans used it as a seasoning, and I think the French mainly use it as a seasoning. Very good if you like the taste of celery, fennel, marjoram, kind of, and even the two are totally different families. To me, lovage has a slightly marjoram type taste, sort of like a sweet oregano, but very mild. That's kind of probably not the best way to put it, but to me, I kind of associate those herbs, in my mind. It's related to OSHA. Now, you may have not ever heard of OSHA. If you were an herbalist in America, oh boy, would you have heard of OSHA a whole lot in the COVID era. OSHA is a member of the Apiaceae family, which is essentially the American cousin to lovage. It mainly grows in high elevations, Rocky Mountains, we're thinking like Colorado and such. Uh, Very much used by Native American tribes. One of the most expensive herbs they used to trade back and forth. There's a legend that it's bear medicine. Bears would dig up OSHA roots and eat them to cure their ills, their ailments. So people would follow the bears to find the OSHA and try to get it before the bear did, obviously. And there does seem to be some truth to that. Bears do seem to be attracted to the scent of OSHA root. It may be sort of like how cats are attracted to catnip. No one knows. But if you're ever out harvesting OSHA, keep an eye out for a bear. Um, and if one charges you, well, you could probably just throw the OSHA root at it and then play dead, and he'd be more interested in the OSHA root because Sort of like they think the reason cats go crazy about catnip and valerian especially is because it smells to them like the secretion of a feline anal gland. Plus, it stones them out. So, bears seem to have the same obsession with the scent of osha that cats do to valerian and catnip, and it seems to have the same effect on them. So, do be careful if you are gathering wild osha. I don't live in an area with a high enough elevation. Uh, I can't grow osha. It's a high elevation plant. Maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. I haven't even really tried. It's even the seeds are expensive. Lovage, the European cousin to osha, can definitely grow. You can probably grow it just about anywhere in North America, unless you're in a desert. And even then, you could probably keep it in some shade and keep the soil moist with a little, maybe a drip system or something. It is both of these herbs, osha and lovage, are powerfully antiviral and especially good for respiratory illnesses. So, as you may understand, whereas OSHA was popular before COVID, when COVID hit, the price went through the roof. Just like Cotinopsis, Dangshin, powerful Chinese herb, very good for the lungs. I've told you before how I was just ordering it. I hadn't even tried growing it because I just thought it was a Chinese herb, which is stupid because I can grow anything in my garden in the, the temperate rainforest of the Appalachian Mountains that they grow in China. Um, the it just went off the market. You couldn't find it, and when it came back on, it was three, four, five times what I was paying before. So definitely consider growing lovage in your garden and learn to cook with it because that's always the best way to get your herbs. Lovage is perennial. Perennial comes back every year. Seeds can be sown in the garden late fall or stratified in the fridge, freezer, whatever, sprouted indoors and transplanted out after the late frost. Well, by now you know I prefer just to put the seeds in the garden in the fall and let nature take its course. I have no no desire to be that hands-on with interfering in the natural order that God created. Plus, I don't live in an HOA or POA, and I don't have to have a very pretty looking garden. If things just kind of sprout up randomly, I am fine with that. Very, very fine with that, actually. Lovage grows well in partial shade. It will do fine in full sun and even fairly heavy shade. So it's one you can put where a lot of things aren't going to grow. Flowers are umbelliferous. So think Queen Anne's lace or carrot or dill, but they're not showy. It's not one that you would really see as an ornamental. That said, the foliage is thick. It has sort of this, feathery quality. It's going to look good as a background plant if you did have to have it in a place where you care about how it looks. Now, it will grow 3 to 4 feet tall. So this is not your little carrot plant. This sucker will grow big. And you need to space them around 2 to 3 feet apart. Now, this is the good news. Hardiness is from zone 3A to 7B and maybe even 8. That means if you live anywhere north of Atlanta, Georgia, you should have no problem growing this plant, even well up into Alaska. And if you live south of Atlanta, you could probably keep it in heavy shade and stretch the zone very, very effectively because this is a plant that does not have to have full sun. You could put it near a creek or a water fountain that's going to naturally cool the air around it. You could put it in shade. And I think you could stretch this plant into just about every square inch of North America, honestly. Maybe not South Florida, maybe not San Antonio or, El Paso, but, and New Mexico, Arizona, that's going to be problematic. But even then, I think with shade and moisture, and I don't see a problem with it. I think you could probably do it compared to OSHA, which I think only grows over like 8 or 9 thousand feet in elevation. Lovage is super easy, and it's one you can include in your diet. Now let's get into another herb that I mentioned along with lovage, and that was marjoram. Now,